And we're back for another episode of Bodybuilding and Business. I don't know if we should even be recording right now. The second I hit record, I started to think about, what if the memory is really full? I don't think it's full. I think we're fine.
Dude.
What?
That was my first thought, too.
As I hit record, I was like...
When I saw you look at the record button and press it...
There was a number 17
and I was like,
on it.
when's the last time we cleared it all?
We're going to clear it after this one. But there was a number 17 on there. I don't even know what that means. 17? Remember being 17?
I don't even know what that means. Yeah.
No.
I do remember being 17. That was probably one of my favorite times in my life. We're not going to talk about it, though.
That's a very bold statement to say for 34 years.
It was a very fun time in my life.
The best. You said, what did you say?
I said it was probably one of my most fun times in my life. Maybe most memorable. I don't know exactly what I said verbatim, but it was a great time in my life.
We'll have to listen back to see what you actually said.
17's what, senior year of high school?
I think so.
Yeah, probably one of my favorite eras.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll leave it there, though.
I'm still waiting for my favorite eras.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a while, dude.
I hope they come soon. Fingers crossed.
I don't think you've done anything different from the time you could walk until now besides get your driver's license. So
I'm hoping that I got a license. I got something in the mail yesterday.
Yeah, you did, dude.
Yeah,
you got a license to kill, dude.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Watch out.
Don't piss this guy off.
Here I come. All right. We are going to go back to school again. But before we do so, it's time for Nutrition 102.
102, dude.
And not Nutrition 102 in regards to contest prep or
well, no, then it would be contest prep 102.
No, hold on. Or in regards to bodybuilding at all, really. It's not just a nutrition.
No, we're going to bring it back to the basics.
Literally Nutrition 102 as in just the basics of nutrition. Not even just for bodybuilding, just for life.
Yeah.
We're going to go through a lot of numbers today, so if you don't like numbers, stick around anyway and give it a full like and listen.
Yeah.
Because we can't afford to say skip to the next one. You need to listen to these. So a lot of numbers, a lot of technical talk today. However, we're going to start it off with a little questione from a subscriber.
Yeah, and I just want to apologize. I'm not going to say names in case he doesn't want to.
Volume off.
Chill out, dude. In case he doesn't want to be
outed.
Yeah, we'll put it that way. I'm not going to say names, but I want you to know the reason why I did not answer you on Monday afternoon when you messaged me this was, first and foremost, my apologies, but it was at my request. So I didn't see it until yesterday. Mm-hmm. But yesterday I talked to Pat about it, and he said, what a good way to lead off the next episode because we knew we wanted to talk about nutrition. So,
truth.
Long story short, okay, I got a question in from one of our followers saying, question, I've been following Elaine Norton approach dieting, just fitting my macros. Can I ask why you are against that approach? I had a pizza on Friday on a cut, purposely didn't eat much before so I could get a couple of slices. I regret it now because the scale today was not kind. I hope it is a sodium thing. Back to the original question, is the reason the micronutrients? Thank you. A lot of different topics we can cover in that one question, right? Mm-hmm. But first and foremost, I don't think Pat and I ever once said in specific why we don't give our clients macro-based diets. We might have briefly touched on it without digging into it too far. But I actually answered this for somebody else, one of my clients recently. And before even getting into the science behind it and actually getting into the number aspect, to put it simple, one of the reasons why I don't like it is because there are a lot of misconceptions on what different sources actually do for your body and why we're actually consuming them in the first place. Agreed? Yes. So if I give a client, let's just say I'm working with a client, I'm saying, okay, you're going to have 200 grams of carbohydrates, 200 grams of protein, and you're going to have 60 grams of fats, right? If I just give them those macros, and I just threw those numbers out there, but let's say I give them those macros and tell them they can pretty much eat whatever they want as long as they end their days at those numbers. Mm-hmm. Before even going into variable change on a day-to-day basis, if they're using different foods every single day and hitting the same numbers, let's just go into the idea that those numbers can mean a lot of different things depending on where those carbs are coming from, where those fats are coming from, and where those proteins are coming from. Mm-hmm. So the quality behind the macronutrient makes a big difference. If my client is saving some of their meals and hitting a lot of their macros from their pizza, it's going to be completely different than if they're hitting those same numbers by eating. And again, not saying everyone needs to follow a diet exactly like this, but something as simple as chicken, rice, avocado, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, eating one clean meal and then a big pizza meal and then a small clean meal, it's going to totally affect you a little bit differently.
Correct. I think
that was me to put it layman's terms.
Yeah. I think as much as one, thank you for the question. Two, there was a couple different questions within that question.
Yes.
So I think even though I want to answer the question first, I think we should start to talk about Nutrition 102 first.
And then kind of go back into it.
And then turn ourselves around and go back. Like, remember Turn the Beat Around?
Turn it upside down.
Yep.
Yeah, that one.
That's what we'll do.
Okay.
But with the question.
All right.
And we'll come back around.
Put your thing down, flip it, and reverse it.
Yes.
Got
back
it.
to Missy. Everything revolves around Missy.
And 2 Chainz.
And 2 Chainz. Mr. Chainz himself. So, Nutrition 102. We have explained in previous episodes and maybe in Nutrition 101, my memory is not the best, so I can't tell you exactly which episode we talked about.
If you didn't listen to the other episodes, he recently had a stroke, so.
Yeah, I've been having those. So, we talked about some numbers, and that's what I kind of want to touch on today. Back to the numbers thing. We talked about a pound of fat being 3,500 calories. To put somebody in a deficit in order to lose 1 pound a week, you would cut 500 calories because 500 times 7 is 3,500.
That's what we said if you guys don't like math, you know.
This is going to suck for you.
Real simple. I'll get a calculator.
But still listen. Yeah, use your calculator and follow along. That's simple math that adds up to what 1 pound of fat equates to, right? So we know that 3,500 calories is 1 pound of fat, or is 1 pound. So we know that we could gain weight and lose weight revolving around that number. Does it always work exactly as that number states? No. But we know that we can use that as a guideline and a base. And somebody who doesn't have a coach and doesn't work with one of us who wants to just figure these things out for themselves can use that number as a base for themselves and work off of said thing. You can find your basal metabolic rate. You can find how many calories you're burning through a day. Numerous different ways. There's literally free apps online. You could type all your credentials in, it gives it to you. You could use your watch nowadays. The Apple Watch does it. The Fitbit does it. There's 100 different ways to find out how many calories you're burning a day. And if somebody wanted to test and lose a pound a week, they could put themselves on said number of calories minus 500, do that 7 days a week, and ideally you'd be losing about a pound a week in that parameters. That will change week by week. Metabolism will slow, body will change, yada, 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 which is what we do and we perfect. But for the average person, you could follow a basic guideline of numbers. What makes up, so we're going to get very technical here. A calorie is a unit of measurement.
We're going to get technical without getting too technical.
Yeah, a calorie is a unit of measurement. It's actually a measurement of heat, but to be not too scientific, think of it as a measurement of energy. It's a measurement of heat, but it's a measurement of energy. It basically is a measurement of energy that you expend in a day. Those calories.
Hence, food is fuel.
Right. We don't just say that for funsies. It's an actual thing. It's a measurement of energy that you're expending in a day. Your calories can come from 3 different things, which are your macronutrients, which is why, and this is all going to tie in, macro-based diet. Macronutrients are what make up your calories. So there's a difference between a calorie-based diet, meaning here, eat 2,000 calories a day. There's a difference.
Following no numbers.
Following no numbers, just stay under 2,000.
Done.
There is a macro-based diet, which Greg just gave an example of, 20 or 200 grams of protein, 200 grams of carbs, 60 grams of fat a day. Hit those numbers. That's your goal. And then there's like a meal plan style diet, which is here's meal 1, here's meal 2, here's meal 3. Follow these things. People can find their way to results in any of the 3. You guys obviously, if you've been listening, know that Greg and I prefer the third option, the meal plan option. But people have found ways to make it work with the other 2 options.
Yes, it's not to say the other 2 don't work. Yes. We have a preference, we have our reasoning, and we'll go even more in detail on it too. But got to cover some ground rules so you understand that a little bit more.
Yes. So the three macronutrients. protein, carbs, and fats. I think nowadays there's enough information out there where people are starting to understand that like carbs aren't the enemy. But for a long time, people looked at carbs as the enemy. For a long time, people looked at fat as the enemy. Luckily, because people aren't that dumb, no one has looked at protein as the enemy, which is at least one positive.
Thankfully.
Thank God no one's taken that out of context and thinking that protein is going to make them fat. Because the amount of protein you'd have to eat to get fat is a lot.
You couldn't do it.
You couldn't. You couldn't physically eat that much food in a day's worth of protein without the carbs and fats and make yourself fat.
Unless all of your protein sources are just super high fatty.
Well, but that's what I mean. Like
unless you're eating pounds and pounds of red meat,
right? You wouldn't be able to eat enough protein that didn't have carbs and fats included in them. Just clean whole protein sources without.
Yes.
And to do that and gain weight is impossible. So there was a lot that was said about carbs being the enemy, fats being the enemy. We're going to break down what the differences between them are. As you guys know, protein is used for cellular repair, down to the most minute little things within the body. It doesn't have to be muscle. It's just cellular repair of any kind. That's why you hear these fad things that come up now and again about collagen and how collagen helps repair things. Like, those are all proteins within the body that are helping things repair. It could be repairing your hair. It could be repairing tissue lining. It could be, organ tissue lining, like not muscle tissue lining. Number of different things. But protein is used for cellular repair, and there are 4 calories per gram of protein. So if you get 25 grams of protein from a scoop of whey,
that is 100 calories for you mathematicians.
Yes, that is 25 times 4, which is 100 calories. Carbohydrates, which are known as the fuel source macronutrient. Carbs are our body's most easily
converted to energy.
Our energy source. And again, I know that we said calories are an energy source themselves, but follow me here they're all energy. Carbs are the easiest used form of energy. Are you all right?
I don't know what's going on, man. I got something stuck in my throat.
Is it because Elijah's jealous that you switched?
It could be, dude.
Elijah tampered with the old elk and tried to poison you.
Might have, but I think it was from Mr. San Powell, dude.
Oh, that could be too.
Anyways.
Surprise bubbles.
Anyways. So, carbohydrates.
Carbohydrates are the easiest used energy source for the body. Carbohydrates also have 4
calories per gram.
I had another stroke.
It's fine, dude.
4 calories per gram. So the same thing. If you had 25 grams of carbs, you were consuming 100 calories. Fats are in layman's terms, are used for hormone production. They help balance your body's hormone levels. They're also still an energy source for you, just like all of these things are. But hormone balance is a big thing with fats. Fats are more than double the amount of calories than proteins and carbohydrates, which is why it's more common to hear somebody following a diet like Greg said, or a macro-based diet of 200 grams of protein, 200 grams of carbs, and 60 grams of fat. When you're like, wow, that's a lot less fat than it is protein and carbs. That's because there's 9 calories per gram of fat. So remember, the other 2 were 4. Fats are 9. So it's more than double. Cats.
Anyway, so I'm going to take over here.
Say a prayer for myself. Fats are the most calorically dense macronutrient.
Yes, they are 9 calories per gram.
So the reason why, for the longest time, people said fats are bad for you is because it is easier to eat more than your daily allowance in fats because it is double the amount of calories as proteins and carbs. So it's easier to go over your amount of calories for the day by consuming things that are high in fat. Fat does not automatically make you fat.
No.
It is just the easiest macronutrient to overeat in and then put yourself in a surplus, which will make you gain weight. Just like, go ahead. Just like carbs are not the enemy for you either. But when you overeat carbs, even though you don't get put into a surplus as quickly, your body can only convert so much of the carbohydrates into energy before it stores more of it and says, I'm going to hold on to this. We can't really burn this. And then your body it might not gain fat instantly, but your body will hold on to some water. And then those calories will add up over time, and then it might turn into body fat over time. And it's a little bit of a domino effect. And again, back to why you don't really hear people saying they ate too much protein and getting fat. The other two have adverse effects of too much of them. The protein, not really as common. Now, we don't have anything against somebody wanting to follow those three things as a diet. You can find success following a macro-based diet, tracking your proteins, your carbs, and your fats. What gets missed when you just look at those three things, and this is question one we're going to answer from the question, is the micronutrients. And Greg already touched on this by the sources of food that you're choosing in a macro-based diet do not matter. A lot of coaches or guidelines that are given to somebody when they're given a macro-based diet are very loose.
They're very vague.
I have seen somebody be given a macro-based diet with food sources to select from, which I'm less opposed to than just a blank macro-based diet that says, as long as you hit those numbers, you did it.
Yeah.
You lose out on some of those micronutrients by choosing foods that aren't the best for you. The more flexibility people have, the more freedom they have to choose what they like, the more likely they are to cheat and find ways to
fit things not as beneficial.
Be less diligent, let's say.
And that's why I kind of didn't want to go too far into it earlier when I was just kind of giving the basis of why we don't like it, right?
Yeah.
But when I said that I had someone else ask this recently and I did answer it for them, that was one of my things was people, if you give a mouse a cookie, right?
Absolutely.
You give them an inch, they're going to take a mile, right? So number one, me and him, as I already mentioned, we love controlling all variables, right?
Yep.
If something goes wrong, something's off during the week, we need to know what. And if every day your food sources were changing, but you were hitting your macros, we don't know what did what. And if you're not working with a coach and you're trying to do things yourself, you're also not going to know where things went wrong, right? So controlling all variables is one of the reasons, but also the fact that when you're giving somebody just numbers and they're hitting those numbers, but they're fitting in Pop-Tarts and they're fitting in protein bars and they're hitting things, like Pat said, that aren't going to be as valuable, or you're not getting all the micronutrients that you need in, guess what? The end result is not going to be the same. Does it work to an extent?
Yep.
Are you still possibly going to be in a caloric deficit? Well, yes. Are you going to be in a caloric deficit? Yes. Are you potentially going to lose weight? Yes. Is the end result still going to be the same, though? No.
No, and if it is the same, it's going to take probably double the amount of time.
Yeah.
So, and to further elaborate on what Greg is saying with that, and to continue answering the question here, our friend asked, he said, I purposely ate less earlier in the day to save up some macros for pizza. I'm going to try to take the pizza out, and we're going to come back to pizza later. With a macro-based diet, this is a common thing that we see. Somebody says, well, I want to eat something a little bit bigger at the end of the day, because now you have the flexibility too. Greg, is it optimal to eat 3 really, really, really small meals early in the day and then eat 1 really, really big meal at the end of the day?
No.
No, it's probably, as we've talked about in our drugs episode, in our nutrition episode, in our contest episode, in our training episode, it is most optimal to spread things evenly throughout the day. And if ever higher and lower amounts of things are added, it's
Pre
around
and post nutrition.
Pre and post training. So, right off the bat, an issue we have again with macro-based diet is, because I want to eat something that's off my plan later on in the day, I'll just eat smaller meals earlier in the day and I'll be fine. Let's say, for an example, that bigger meal wasn't even pizza. Say it was still a relatively bodybuilder-friendly meal and it was pasta with some penne pasta and ground beef, right? However, I saved my macros earlier in the day. I pulled back on my carbs a little bit. I pulled back on my fats a little bit because I knew I was going to get some more food later on in the day.
A little extra pasta, a little bit extra ground beef.
Yeah, so instead of eating, I'm supposed to have 200 grams of protein in a day. I instead only ate like 100 grams of protein earlier in the day and 100 grams of carbs. So now I have 100 grams of protein and 100 grams of carbs for this gigantic pasta meal. Isn't that sick? maybe in the moment you're eating it, sure. Like, yes, the satisfaction of I'm eating this thing, this is delicious, sure. But even though you followed that macro plan and you still hit those 200 carb, 200 protein, you're going to feel awful eating 100 grams of protein from ground beef and pasta, and you're going to feel awful eating 100 grams of carbs from penne pasta in one sitting.
And there's a lot to take into consideration as to why you would feel bad.
Yes.
Number one, your body is not used to it. It's used to breaking down nice, even, consistently sized meals, right? If you were following the plan the rest of the way like you should have, right? Another thing, you're going to probably stress the GI tract, right?
For sure.
Not to mention the amount of fats in one sitting by saving that 100 grams of protein to get from your ground beef. You're going to have all smaller carbs, all smaller proteins, all smaller fats throughout the day, and then you're just going to overload your system at night when you're inactive, and you're not going to be utilizing that energy.
Right. We talked about carbs being our energy source, and if you have too much of them, your body starts to reserve them as opposed to use them because it literally can't utilize them. Even though you're staying within your total amount of carbohydrates for the day, if you try to consume them all in one sitting, your body's not smart enough to adapt in the moment and say, I'm going to use all 100 of these carbs right now. It just won't happen, right? Go ahead, Gregory.
Especially with the plethora of fats that you're taking in with them that are going to slow down the digestion.
Correct.
So even if you are a little active at night, guess what? You're not going to be utilizing all those carbs.
Correct. And that's the second the second part to that is like, not only is it the carb part that just happened, you combined all of these carbs with all of these fats with all of these proteins, which again, as we've talked about, it's hard to gain just fat on protein. Protein is hard to eat in a day.
Yeah.
To consume a large amount of protein is difficult. It doesn't happen easily. So by cutting protein back earlier in the day and then having an influx of protein later in the day, you're going to get full really, really fast. And once you get full and then you're still shoveling extra fats and carbs from that pasta down and the beef, you know what I mean? Your body's going to essentially freak out. To be non-scientific at all, your body's going to be like, what the F is going on here?
You're going to be like, oh, blah, blah. But it's going to taste good, right?
It's going to taste good for a moment, but your body's not going to know how to break that food down and utilize it moving forward from there.
And if you're one of those who are like, no, I do macro diets all the time and I love it, blah, 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 great. But go ahead and try what we just said. And you tell me, you do that for an entire week and tell me the progress on the scale versus keeping it consistent with all of your calories and macros throughout the entire day and not overloading at night. And guess what? You're probably going to make a little more progress when it's evenly distributed throughout the day.
Correct. To touch on even more of the question.
Go for it, dude. I'm forgetting what the last part was.
Do you think we didn't touch enough on what we just touched on? We covered the calories and macros and how they break down.
Yeah, I think the only other thing that I was going to say before that I think that why carbs being an enemy was like a big misconception back in the day was the fact that fats, as you mentioned, helps with hormone production, right?
Sure.
Protein, cellular repair, right? We know we can get energy from our fat sources, and even to an extent protein sources, right? Carbohydrates that we do convert to energy faster by converting to glucose, so on and so forth, not to get technical, right?
Sorry, dude.
It's a non-essential nutrient. Our body can survive without carbs.
Right.
So I think that's why people started with, Atkins diet, keto. Well, keto started actually in the medical field, but things like that because carbs was the enemy because carbs was non-essential.
Right.
I think it's important to know that. And the reason why I bring that up is because you also mentioned people being afraid of fats because people thought I eat more fat, I get fat. But they're not realizing body fat is different than taking in good fats, right?
Correct.
Fat is an essential nutrient. We need it for proper hormonal production, right? So you need your fats, you need your proteins. If carbs are utilized in a proper manner, and like you said, if we're doing large influxes, it's around times that we're going to use that energy source, so on and so forth, right? None of them have to be the enemy, right?
Right.
If you totally just think that one is the enemy, fat, this, whatever, fat could be the enemy and carbs can be the enemy, right? I don't really see any source where protein's going to be the enemy or any situation.
Yeah.
But fat is only going to be the enemy when utilized wrong and not understanding what fats are good for you, what fats are bad for you, and when you should be having them.
Right.
Same thing with carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are not the enemy, but when used incorrectly or the wrong sources, then they are the enemy. If you understand what we're trying to teach you in Nutrition 101, Nutrition 102, and I'm sure there's going to be 3, 4, and 5, right?
Yep.
If you understand what all of these macronutrients do, and in turn, eventually we'll go over micros, what they're doing for you and how they benefit you, as long as you use them as a tool and properly understand them, none of them need to be the enemy.
Right. I agree. Man, that just, when you said that, it just made me think about more things that we could touch on. But again, I didn't want to get too technical. But since we are answering this question as well, the question that was being asked touched on the micronutrients. And is that the reason why we don't like the macro diet? And no, it's not. But to further elaborate as to what that could mean, yes, I would prefer someone to follow a meal plan because the fat sources I'm going to give somebody on a meal plan tend to be mono and poly unsaturated fats, which the body can utilize.
People are like, wait, that's not math.
He said numbers, which the body tends to utilize a little bit better, whereas a saturated fat might be. And again, that's not even that's saying we're working with a healthy person, not somebody who already has pre-existing conditions that they need to be controlling their saturated fats.
Yes.
So there is a micronutrient component to it, and we've talked about the proteins and how not all proteins are
Created equally.
So there is a micronutrient aspect to a macro-based diet being non-effective. Going forward from that and not going too much into detail about all of the micros, that could be a whole episode.
That's right. We should do a whole episode on that.
Continuing forward about his questions and him talking about, is it the sodium? Did I gain weight from the sodium from the pizza, right? So now I'm going to touch.
That's part of it.
Now I'm going to touch on what you went and had on your macro-based diet.
I didn't know what else you wanted to go into when you started that, but I was going to bring you back to, you said, I'm not even going to go into the pizza. We'll go back to that.
Yeah.
So is this where it's at?
Now,
so I don't remind you later?
Now I'm ready for pizza.
All right, let's talk pizza. That's my favorite topic.
I know, I'm always ready for pizza. So, first of all, unless you restricted, again, said person, we're going just based off your question. We didn't ask follow-ups. You can most certainly send us follow-ups after you hear this episode. Unless you were saving calories earlier in the day to eat a boxed frozen pizza in which you knew the calories you were consuming from it, one, you weren't following a macro-based diet to eat that pizza.
Yeah, because if you go out and you go to a mom and pop shop and you order a 12-inch double dough pizza, sausage, pepperoni, and bacon, you have no idea what the macros are.
You can't guess that. There's no way to guess that.
Listen, I owned a pizzeria.
You can't.
I couldn't tell you.
It doesn't work that way.
You know?
And then again, and now I'm saying this because that's another reason I don't prefer macro-based diets, because each and every application on your phone to help you track these things
gives you a different number.
Will have different numbers and different information put in them, because most of them, if you're paying for a premium membership, you are allowed to enter your own information into them. I have seen on MyFitnessPal a Big Mac be 0 calories because someone thought it was funny to enter a Big Mac and say that it was 0 calories. So,
Got me.
Yeah, got you, dude. So, again, I'm not picking on you for saying this, but I'm saying this in regards to, if you were just eating a cheat meal to eat a cheat meal, got it, understood.
Eat a cheat meal.
Why did you cut your macros earlier in the day, knowing you were having a cheat meal at night? That's not the point of a cheat meal or the point of a macro-based diet.
What Pat is saying, to reemphasize, that is if you were saying that you were using that as a cheat meal.
Yes.
Now, if you were counting that as your regular, I'm following a diet day.
Yes. So let's say this...
Because you're ending at the same macros.
Let's say in this exact example, there was a 200 protein, 200 carbs, 60 grams of fat to hit. You hit 150 protein before that meal. You hit 100 carb and only 20 fat. So you had 40 fat to spare, 100 carb to spare, and 50 protein to spare. And you're like, cool, that's a half of the pizza. The half of this DiGiorno frozen
pretty
pizza.
high protein pizza, dude. Send it my way.
Let's say 175. I don't know. But saving it for that pizza. Of course, you felt awful afterwards.
Yeah.
And of course, the scale was not nice to you. It might have been sodium. But also, if you tracked your sodium, which is a micronutrient as well, within your diet and you drank plenty of water every day, then it shouldn't be from sodium.
Yeah.
You can hold water from a cheat meal and it not be directly sodium based.
Correct.
A frozen pizza is probably high in sodium, so that could have been the reason for it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it is the case. You're probably holding on to water and inflammation and having some digestional distress because you're used to eating 50 grams of protein and 50 grams of carbs 4 meals in a row throughout the day, and now all of a sudden you saved all of your food for one gigantic meal at the end of the day, and your body had no idea how to break it down and how to use it. Especially, and again, I don't know the details, but most people don't eat pizza and then go work out. So especially if you were eating this pizza
You're not
at
going
night,
and expending those calories that you just consumed.
right? So the reason you felt awful really didn't have, it had something to do with it being a macro-based diet, but it also didn't have anything to do with it being a macro-based diet. You tried to consume too many calories in one sitting. You might have been able to eat one slice of pizza on your macro-based diet and not felt awful the next day. There's the reason Greg and I don't like macro-based diets, is because that one piece of pizza you fit into your macro-based diet was empty calories for the day.
Yes.
It didn't do anything for you from a healthy fat standpoint. It didn't do anything for you from a healthy protein
In essence,
standpoint.
not saying you can't enjoy life, especially if you're a lifestyle client and whatever, right?
No.
But that meal, if you saved all of your calories for one slice of pizza, by Patrick saying that those are empty calories, we are literally saying that in theory is, not in theory, in facts, that is a waste of a meal. It is doing zero benefit to you and your goal.
Correct.
And again, that's why there is cheat meals and they serve purposes. And that's a whole nother conversation. But like we said, if you are doing this as part of your daily routine to hit, not even your daily routine, but you are doing it that day to fit your macros and stay to plan,
Right.
you may as well just use it as a cheat meal and gone on the next day and went back to following clean food sources.
Right.
And again, as he said, the sodium aspect, if you eat the same thing every other day and your sodium's pretty much balanced because you're using the same hot sauce and everything, you're using the same seasonings and everything, and then all of a sudden you go have this big influx, yes. Could be because of the influx of sodium. But like he said, it's more so probably because of where your calories are coming from, not to mention the amount of dairy that you're taking in. That's pretty much your entire fat and protein source right there. Mm-hmm. Again, empty calories, right? Which dairy itself is a natural inflammatory, so it's going to actually cause water retention throughout the body, right?
And a lot of people can't break down dairy, as well as some other more ideal sources of just food in general. I'm not even going to say protein or fats. Just dairy's hard for people to break down.
Yeah. And then just the caloric standpoint, like he already mentioned. So
right. And another thing about the cheat meal aspect of the whole thing too, and not even the cheat meal and the macro aspect as well. When we're eating a surplus of calories, it's also hard to drink the normal amount of water you're supposed.
Because your stomach is full.
Next time you're having a cheat meal, be cautious of what you're doing. I'm sure you'll realize, I definitely didn't drink as much water as I normally did. And if you do drink as much water as you normally do, I bet you don't eat as much in that cheat meal as you were planning on eating.
And if you somehow manage to do so, you're going to be very uncomfortable.
Yeah, if you still manage to drink the same amount of water.
If you do it just to prove Pat wrong,
right,
you are going to feel very uncomfortable.
Right. Something that goes hand in hand with the bloat and water weight gain post cheat meal or post large meal that's not ideal or efficient for your goals tends to tag along with the fact that your stomach is filling up with food and you don't want to put extra water in it. And then you end up not hitting your water goal for the day and not getting enough water. Oddly enough, people, not drinking enough water will make you hold more water.
Another big misconception. We go into that a whole other time.
Yep.
Just hydration in general.
Just understand.
Hydration and electrolytes.
Right. Just understand the body works in weird ways. More water flushes water. Less water holds water. Just remember that. So, I wanted to, and I understand. I'm sorry for those listening. I'm sorry for the question that we're answering. We're covering a lot of different topics with broad within one question with very broad strokes. I also want to touch on, again, because we touch on this almost every week, and I don't mind touching on this almost every week because it's a very important thing that people need to understand. You don't need a cheat meal. Nobody.
And that's why I said,
yeah,
cheat meals serve a purpose.
Right.
Not you get one every week.
Nobody needs a cheat meal. The amount of people that actually physically need a cheat meal is very, very. Did I say the amount of people?
It's slim to none.
Number. It's very, very low, the amount that actually need it. Now, from a mental standpoint, I understand.
Correct.
And this is another reason, circling back to why we don't like to practice macro-based diets. Macro-based diets are designed for the person who needs mental relief, not physical relief. A macro-based diet suits the person who says, I had a long day at work today, and it'd be really nice to go home and
make some homemade burgers instead of my ground turkey and, sweet potato or whatever.
Crack open, what are those low-calorie drinks that got big a couple years ago?
I don't know, dude. I drink water and bourbon.
The alcoholic ones.
Oh, like a Truly or something?
Yeah. I would love to go. Those are only 10 calories. I'd love to go home and crack open 3 or 4 of those because I had a long day at work and I'm going to...
Salute.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I get it.
A macro-based diet, and I don't say this to offend any one person, but is more geared towards the weak-minded individual who needs that relief more frequently.
Yeah.
That needs a mental break, not a physical break. Because I promise you, your body doesn't need the physical break.
No, your body is actually loving what you're doing.
Yes.
It is all mental at that point.
You're allowing your body mental fatigue to wear yourself down physically.
Yeah.
And that's where the breakdowns happen. And that's the thing that is, again, one of the biggest reasons we don't like macro-based diets is because it does cater to the weak-minded, the person who needs the mental break from everything. And unfortunately, if you're already weak-minded and you need a mental break from everything, you're going to be the person who does the things like save all of their calories to go home and eat a frozen pizza at the end of the night. And you're going to make no progress. Just because, and again, you can make progress eating a macro-based diet by eating 95% of the same foods every single day. But then, like on Friday, Greg said you wanted to make like homemade turkey burgers. So your carb sources for one meal changes a little bit, but you're still eating the same turkey you would eat in that meal, and the same portion size, the same 8 ounces you would normally eat in that meal. But you went from a jasmine rice to two low calorie buns, and that was your mental relief. That person could make progress, whether they're gaining weight, losing weight, whatever. What ends up happening is people do that every night of the week.
They get comfortable. And they're like, oh, I got away with that. And then they start subbing other things out, not just those buns for their jasmine rice.
Right. And I promise you, even though you're only making that swap once, that one swap for those buns will do more damage than you probably think it is doing. And it will slow down your progress. And so we've covered a lot of reasons why we don't enjoy it, but we're not here to say that we don't think it can work.
No, I've used it in certain situations with people with success, right? But overall, 9 out of 10 times, the reason why I totally avoid doing it now is because of exactly what you just said. People get comfortable, and it all starts with, this is one of my favorite things. Well, I don't want to be a bodybuilder. I'm not an athlete. I'm not a this. Like, I just want a flexible diet. I want to be able to eat what I want, but I need to know how to portion it and blah, blah, blah. But they're totally disregarding everything else we already talked about in this episode and what those calories are actually doing for them. Well, if you really want to lose weight, but you're not a bodybuilder, you're not an athlete, okay? Well, how bad do you want to lose the weight?
Right.
Do you want to lose the weight over a 2-year span? Or do you want to hit your goal in 6 months and learn how to live a healthy lifestyle and maintain it?
Right.
There's a big difference. I was going to say something. You were saying how flexible dieting, macro-based diets, okay, are for the weak-minded, right? Well, the problem is dieting shouldn't be dieting.
Right.
Dieting is a lifestyle. You are all asking to make changes, no matter what your end goal is. Right. You're asking to make changes, and with those changes comes sacrifice, right? Food can be used as a reward in certain situations, right? But at the end of the day, why are you going to reward yourself constantly with the things that were actually taking you from your goals?
Right. Listen, if I had somebody who wanted to eat a macro-based diet and just live a healthy lifestyle where they said, I've got these protein goals, these carb goals, and these fat goals to hit every day. And for dinner, sometimes I'm going to make chicken with a little bit of olive oil and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And they're all healthy, whole food ingredients. Like, sure, have at it. Because that is a healthy lifestyle. You chose a healthy fat source. You chose.
Bro, I'm over with it.
Yeah.
I don't even listen to you anymore.
You went and got a healthy fat source. You went and got a lean source of protein. You went and got a carbohydrate source that digests easily. Like, you're doing the things that need to be done. Unfortunately, people don't do that.
Yeah.
And that's why we don't utilize those things, is because we know it's much easier to teach people good habits by teaching them exactly, if you do eat chicken, rice, and avocado, this is a healthy, lean source of protein, this is a healthy, tasty source of fat, and this is an easily digestible source of carbohydrates. If you eat these things together, they'll digest well, you'll feel good, and you'll perform good.
Done.
And that's what somebody should not only just take away from a bodybuilding standpoint, that's what somebody should take away for healthy eating for the rest of their life. Now, do I tell my mom she needs to eat chicken, rice, and avocado every day for the rest of her life? No, not exactly. But now if I've taught my mom how to meal plan and how to set stuff up for herself, she would realize, oh, okay, because like I shouldn't eat this meal of... Give me an example of a...
Prosciutto.
Just prosciutto. I'm
Italian
gonna roll up some prosciutto and snack on it, right? Like, what am I really getting here? I'm getting a non-optimal
source
of protein and a saturated fat. Is this really benefiting me? Probably not. So maybe I could switch that for something else, right? It's just teaching these things. And I think that unfortunately, a macro-based diet without a coach guiding you throughout the process leads you to still not making healthier choices. Where a meal plan by yourself or with a coach teaches you instinctually how to start dieting properly when you're no longer with that person or you're no longer following that meal plan. We've talked a lot about why we don't like macro dieting already. Did we answer every aspect of his question? Can you just pull it up one more time really quickly to make sure?
I thought you were just going to say, do we ask or do we answer why we like it? And I was going to say no, because I don't.
No, don't like it.
We're following an approach, respecting my macros. Why were you against it? Had a pizza, didn't eat. The scale went up. Micronutrients. No, man.
We touch on all of those things?
Yeah.
Yeah. All of those reasons are why, for sake of not having to recap the entire thing we just talked about, those are all the reasons why we don't like macro-based diets. I think you could have had a much more enjoyable process and a much more enjoyable time and less likely to see adverse effects from your diet if potentially you just followed a meal plan and then when it was time for you to have a cheat meal, you had a cheat meal. And guess what? Having the cheat meal, again, cheat meals are not needed, but if a coach like one of us gave you a cheat meal, we would also tell you, don't worry about the scale afterwards.
Correct.
We're not worried about it. You just had that cheat meal, and it's not going to be kind to the scale. So don't check your weight until the next time it's time for us to check in for you. That was for your mental sanity. You didn't need it physically. Don't go and do that thing.
I was going off of cheat meals. I didn't know if you were done yet, though.
Good.
One more thing I don't think that we touched on. We mentioned change in variables, but the only examples we've really given with not liking macro-based diets is people fitting in foods that are not good sources, etc. Right?
Sure.
But variable change is huge, right?
Yes.
So let's say Patrick or I wrote you a diet, and it was macro-based. It said 200 carbs, 200 fats, 200 carbs, 200 protein, and 60 fats, okay? Mm-hmm. And we gave you a healthy source of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, all to substitute. Not that we do this, but let's say, hypothetically speaking, for the sake of this conversation, we did.
Yes.
And you were to follow that plan and check in weekly and send your weight, your pictures, your feedback, whatever, right? If every day, every meal's protein source is changed, carb sources changed, and fat sources changed, again, just because they're good sources doesn't mean that it's the best source for you.
Correct. And that's a very good. Thank you for bringing that up before we moved on from this.
Yeah, I'm intelligent.
From this episode. Just because something is considered optimal or ideal or easily digesting or whatever the term you want to use, those are general figures. We know that most people digest chicken really, really well.
Most people digest jasmine rice
I
very
don't
well.
want to hear someone say, well, I don't like chicken. No. We're talking about digesting it. I don't care if you don't like the taste of it. I don't care if you think it's chewy when you reheat it. None of those things. I'm strictly talking about after you finish eating the chicken meal. Most people do not feel full, bloated, uncomfortable, whatever the case may be. It's a very easily digestible form of protein. However, there are few that it doesn't sit well with.
Correct.
And with that person, I would say we're not going to eat chicken anymore.
Yeah. It's the same thing for everything, though.
Yes, and that's the point
Not
that
to
Greg
hone
was
in just
making.
on chicken, but that could be the same thing with ground beef. It could be the same thing with salmon. It could be the same thing with an egg white. It could be shrimp, steak.
Anything.
It could be anything that us, your coach, or yourself is feeding you, right? But not just protein sources. You may respond very well to certain fats.
Yep.
You might respond very well to certain carbohydrates. But again, we can't or you can't figure out what is the best for you if day by day, meal by meal, even using whole food healthy sources that are recommended, they're changing.
Right.
There's no way to figure out where something went wrong. Just because you feel bad at 3 p.m., that doesn't mean that it's from your 2 o'clock meal.
Right.
You're still breaking food that you had at your 11 o'clock meal.
You're only creating more work for yourself by doing that because eventually as a
Coach, damn.
Well, that's what I mean. As a coach, your only response to somebody who, say, is eating 4 meals a day, switches the meal every time they eat it, 7 days a week, whatever, right? The only response from a coach's standpoint to figure out which one it is to now ask you, well, can you start journaling after every meal and see how you feel after each meal?
How was digestion? What were bathroom habits like that day?
Yeah. In order to figure out which of the foods it is that did that to you. Where if somebody was just following a meal plan and they eat...
But what people need to understand from a coaching side too is, let's say you did journal.
Yeah.
Okay. And you did change up all these meals 7 times a week, whatever it is, 4 times. So 28 meals were all changed up, right?
Yeah.
But guess what? Hey, I felt a little bit bloated at this time. Okay, well, what else changed that day? How was your sleep the night prior? Did you use different seasonings, different condiments? Did you do any form of physical activity before or after that meal? What does your typical day look like? Are you usually more active before that time of day? Are you not? How was your stress? How was your sleep? Like, there's so much that goes into it that now there's no way that we could actually help you.
You're right. And even bigger than what you just said, that was a very good point, but even bigger than that, can you drink enough water for 1 day and notice the effect in a week? No, right? Can you eat good for 1 day and notice the effect in a week? No, right? You have to be consistent with it.
I should probably answer out loud because some people aren't watching.
You're turning your head, but I'm answering for you.
Okay, got it. Okay.
No, because you have to be consistent with it. So listen, even if there was a guessing game or you were having a client journal and say, this is how I felt after this is how I felt after that, this is how this felt, this is how that felt. If you're consistently changing the things you're eating every day, you might not feel the immediate effect of that thing right after that meal. So you might have had a sweet potato in your third meal on a Thursday afternoon, but then Saturday you feel really, really crappy from it. I'm not saying that sweet potatoes make you feel crappy 2 days later, but what I am saying is there's a chance that that's still an adverse effect from the sweet potato that your body didn't break down 2 days ago.
Yeah, it could have stressed it, which is throwing off your digestion for future meals. But because you felt good right after that sweet potato meal, you think nothing of it. But it's really the stress that caused, and now your body trying to break down these other foods that may typically be digested well, now they're not.
Yes. There's not only the idea that a meal could instantaneously give you a bad side effect, but there's also the fact that the more you change, the longer lasting effect of change. It's like a domino effect.
Yeah.
It's going to keep knocking more dominoes down. Whereas if every day you checked off exactly what you ate and things stayed the same without variables of change, it becomes much easier for the person, for the coach to figure out, oh, that's the problem. It's right. I'm diagnosing it. It's right there. And I promise you'll see results if you change that one thing. So besides, yes, like you said, that stress and your outside life and all of those things could also make a difference. You got to remember, you don't eat good for one day and all of a sudden feel good for the whole month.
Correct.
Or you don't eat good for one day and lose the weight instantly. Just like if you change what you eat every day, that won't clear your system forever. You could eat something really bad and it can be in your system for a full week. I have some clients that abuse, which is why I've been so honest and honing in about not needing cheat meals. But I've had clients have a really bad cheat meal on a weekend and then all week my weight was up still and this and that. And look,
Diet's not working.
the diet's not working. No, you just ate way too much
Cheryl.
last week. You cannot work a bad diet. You can't work yourself back. You could have an adverse effect from a meal you ate literally an entire week ago.
Yeah.
That's possible to happen. So if you could have an adverse effect from one meal a full week ago while staying on a meal plan, what do you think could happen from eating foods that you're changing every single day?
Yep. I think to sum it up,
I
what we're
digress.
trying to say is we don't like macro-based diets. And if I'm being completely honest, I think the majority of reasons why a lot of coaches do use them is, I'm going to try.
Our last episode, bad coaches.
Bad coaches. So, and again, there are some very, very prestigious names in the bodybuilding and coaching world who do use it.
Yeah.
But to me, it's a marketing gimmick. If I advertised right now and I told all these people that I do macro-based diets, I guarantee you I will quadruple my clientele base, because every bodybuilder wants to hear that they could eat what they want as long as they hit certain numbers. Like, I'm not going to go into certain people and criterias, right? But there are so many people that would jump on board just because they realize, hey, I don't have to actually diet strictly.
I could eat Rice
I could
Krispies
eat
before I
Rice
work out.
Krispies before I work out. I could have some Sour Patch Kids and fit them into my macros and blah, 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 blah. Like, coaches use it knowing their client's progress is going to be slower and that it's not the best thing for them from an internal standpoint, but they know more people are going to jump on board and it's more money to their pocket. And that is why they do it. Therefore, guess what? I ain't going to be one of them. No. You want to work hard. You want what's best for you.
You want to learn how to eat for the rest of your life. You want to learn how to make changes to sustain a healthy lifestyle.
Pat and Greg are here.
We're here for you.
And if you want a coach who does not care about your best interest, hire a macro-based coach. See you later on episode 29, Nutrition 103. Mic drop.
That'll be, I don't know.
Yeah, it'll probably be in the
29.
30s, but whatever. You get what I'm saying.
Until next time, guys. I hope we answered the questions.
But
Ask us more questions.
for the
like this.
asker, enjoy your pizza,
Yeah.
but not by trying to fit it in your macros.
And not by getting on a scale the next day to make sure it came
No,
off.
if you want it as a cheat meal, it's a cheat meal. Enjoy it.
it's
Move
not-
on.
it's not
Back to the
gonna-
diet the next day.
Yeah, it's not coming off.
Yep.
All right.
Hope we answered it for you. Take care.